Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing a GeForce RTX 5060 Ti 16GB GPU in The Elder Scrolls Oblivion 4 Remastered. Now with the update 1.2, which supposedly fixes a bunch of things, including performance fixes as well. Let's continue going over the specs, and the 5060 Ti that I have here is the Palette Infinity 3 version of the card. I'm not manually overclocking it, you can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power Ups GPU Z, and over on the left, I'm pairing it with the Ryzen 7 9800X 3D and 32GB of RAM. These are, of course, overkill a little bit for the 5060 Ti, but if you pair it with something like a Ryzen 5 7600, you should get the same FPS. Let's get into it, shall we? And first up, let's go over the settings. I am starting at 1080p resolution. We're also going to test this one at 1440p and 4K, and I'm using the high settings preset right here, so everything is set to the high settings, and the Lumen hardware ray tracing is turned off because, well, this is very intensive of a setting, honestly, and it still uses ray tracing, but it's software ray tracing here, which is on low at the moment. DLSS is set to DLAA as well, sharpness 30%, that doesn't really matter, and frame generation is turned off right now, but I'm also going to try that a little bit later. Let's start counting our FPS here, and in this city area we're getting 60s, 70s. It's actually, yeah, dropping into the 50s already. Yeah, guys, this is a bit worrisome from a 5060 Ti. I expected a little bit better performance, especially after the newest update claiming some performance gains, you know, but yeah, it turns out this is still a UE5 title, so it's still going to perform like crap a little bit. Also, we're seeing some stutters already, like we saw a big one so far, but overall it's a much better experience than at release, that's for sure. I haven't tried this GPU on the release version of this game, but I've tried a bunch of different cards, and yeah, it was really stuttery, super inconsistent frame times, you know, and it was constantly stuttering with micro stutters everywhere, especially with like that 5090 and 4090 videos that I made when they hadn't really fixed anything in any of those issues yet. Now, also, the high settings is my preferred preset to play here in this title, especially at 1080p resolution, since we're getting like 60 plus most of the time, with some drops into the 50s, unfortunately. But if you set it down to medium, it starts looking really bad. You lose all of the reflections on the water, which actually do look pretty good, you know, and the game just looks way more bland on medium settings. So I'll keep the high settings, probably even at 1440p resolution, even though it's definitely not going to perform very well. But the thing is, we do have DLSS support, so maybe at the 1440p resolution with like DLSS quality and some frame generation added to it, it's going to be a good experience. My god, this is so bad. 6 FPS, 1% lows, just from the stutters from UE5, basically loading in new areas and so on will make it stutter like that. And well, we just got out of the city, went in this new area, and that happened. Yes, so the game is still completely broken. Yay! I'm not sure why in my head, you know, dedicated performance update, you know, it could fix the stutters, or at least most of them, but that's not what I'm seeing here, unfortunately, guys. We're still getting a very low 1% lows. It's not a VRAM limitation or anything. Obviously, this is the 16GB card, not the 8GB, even though the VRAM allocation is actually going slightly, very, very slightly over 8 gigs. Sometimes, even the 8 gig version would probably perform around the same as this. Maybe running slightly out of VRAM sometimes, but yeah, that would cause a little bit more stuttering. But all of the stutters that we're seeing here aren't VRAM related, they're just game and engine related and optimization related, which is basically non-existent in this title. We're at 1080p resolution. Oh my gosh. And yes, guys, I let the shader compilation run in the background before I loaded into the game. I just let it run for like 5 minutes there. I went downstairs to something, eat a little sandwich, you know, and then I came back and the CPU utilization wasn't at 100% anymore. It was at 17% in the menu, so that means that it did install all of the shaders properly, and it compiled all of the shaders properly, basically. Yet, this is the experience that they give us, guys. It's a stuttery mess. I don't even know if the developers actually play their own games, because this is ridiculous. I know a lot of people that can have fun like this still, and a lot of people did play this game, obviously, on PC on launch day, which was even more unstable, you know, and they still had a lot of fun, saying that I was very picky because, yeah, I noticed every little stutter, and for them it was absolutely perfect. But no, guys, no, it is not perfect. It is not good either. Like, oh boy. Anyway, frame generation does help it by a little bit, my friends. It will still have those little spikes here and there when loading in new areas, you know, but at least we're not seeing as many micro stuttering issues. The frame time is not like that, you know. It's much flatter here with the frame generation enabled, and this is the old version of frame generation for some reason. I think it already supported the latest version of FG, but now it went back to the old version. I'm not sure what's going on here, but yeah, it works very well. As you can see, minimal input lag as well, since the baseline FPS were right around like 70 frames on average. So this is something that I would definitely choose to use in this title and recommend as well. But yeah, we now get 120 frames per second average, which feels very smooth indeed on a high refresh rate panel here that I'm using, and input lag wise, once again, it's very acceptable. I might be able to notice little tiny difference in terms of input lag, but since this is a single player title, I'm fine with that, completely fine with that. So this is my preferred way to play this game at 1080p resolution with the 5060 Ti for sure. Also, in terms of artifacting, I can't notice anything wrong with it with the frame generation. I noticed that it's a little bit over sharpened, unfortunately. You can adjust the sharpening as well, but if you lower it down from 30%, I think, or I feel like it looks way too soft. So you either have it over sharpened or you have it very soft, and there's no way around it. But in terms of artifacting from frame generation, even in these like very dense bushes and vegetation, trees, you know, yeah, it doesn't really have any like ghosting or motion blur caused by the frame generation, which is very nice. Also, over here, starting to drop by a lot into the 80s, so this area is quite a bit more intensive than where we were previously, or maybe it's the sunset time of the day that's a bit more intensive as well. But even with 80 FPS, which means a baseline FPS of around like 50, 80 FPS with frame generation, you know, it still doesn't feel too bad in terms of input lag. I can definitely live with that, and I would prefer this than a 50 FPS experience without frame generation. So FG is here to help us a lot in this title, and I do recommend it's a good implementation. Yeah, as you can see, 50s, as I was saying. So, yeah, much more choppy of an experience as well. Doesn't feel as good as with the frame generation. So yeah, that's it for 1080p resolution, guys. I'm not gonna try like DLSS quality, or I guess I can. I mean, yeah, if you use DLSS quality, the game looks very bad because it's now rendering at the 720p resolution and it being upscaled to 1080p, and especially in these leaves, there's some sort of vegetation in this title. Not all of the vegetation behaves like this, but these finer ones look terrible. They look absolutely awful. This is one of the worst implementations that I've ever seen of DLSS in a game so far. And that's a big shame. At 1440p, it does work kind of well. At 4K resolution, obviously, it's a much higher resolution and it looks way better with the DLSS enabled. But at 1080p, this is one of those games where I would not enable the super resolution. But let's bump it up to 1440p. I'll need to switch monitors, so yeah, I'll just do that real quick. Oh, and by the way, I noticed this as well. Every time I get out of this game now, it has a crash report. Alpha games, guys. I told you that this was or felt like an alpha when it released, and I guess it's still in early beta right now. Okay, so we're back here, 2560 by 1440 resolution now, utilizing the high settings preset, still the same settings. Lumen hardware ray tracing is turned off, Lumen software ray tracing is on low, and I'll go back to DLAA for now and check it out like this. No frame generation either. Alright, here we go. So we're getting 50s here. That's not a massive drop coming from what we saw at 1080p resolution. Now it's in the 40s. So it was dipping down to like 59, 58 frames per second at 1080p in this scenario here, and now it's dropping into the 40. Okay, yeah, 40 FPS. I thought it was only going to drop to like 45, but it actually does dip down by quite a lot. I mean, it's still not a terrible experience with 40-ish frames per second. It's high settings after all in a UE5 title. For a $430 GPU that sells for a little bit more than that, I feel like we should be getting better performance, but at the same time, I can't really blame the GPUs. Like 90% of the blame goes to the developers here in this one, and the engine itself being so terrible whenever Lumen is enabled. If they allowed it to have a toggle for Lumen, you know, because there are mods out there that allow you to disable Lumen. It also does make the game look a lot more bland, you know, in terms of its graphics. You lose a lot of like the ambient occlusion and the global illumination and so on, but it still works, and it gets you way higher FPS than the Lumen stuff. It makes something like a GTX 1080 Ti be very playable in this title, whereas with Lumen enabled, it struggles with like 30, 40 frames per second. Anyway, guys, yeah, 40-ish FPS is what we get here. I guess that's not a too terrible baseline for us to enable frame generation on top of, but there would be quite a lot of input lag there. So what I'd choose to do this time around at 1440 is enable quality DLSS, and this does look a little bit softer. Once again, it's one of the worst implementations of DLSS in this game, but at the same time, it still looks way better than 1080p native resolution with DLAA did. And this makes it run pretty much at the same FPS as 1080p native resolution, right? It was dropping into the 50s here to like 59, 58. This is exactly the same, 58, 59. So this is also a good baseline FPS for us to enable frame generation on top of, with minimal input lag and no artifacting, and it's going to perform amazingly like that. And I mean, if all you need is 60 FPS or 70 FPS average experience, this is also pretty good. 69 FPS average experience, by the way. Very nice. So yeah, aside from the stutters, this is now a decent experience with the 5060 Ti 16GB GPU. It looks 1440p, although a bit softer than DLSS quality in the vast majority of titles, you know. But now the FPS are way better. The game is way smoother. In some areas, we're getting like double the FPS as well, coming like from 40 FPS to 80 FPS sometimes. So that's a massive gain by the use of DLSS Super Resolution here. In terms of the vegetation, though, the finer leaves still have a little bit of shimmering to it, and the game overall just looks soft. Even with DLAA at 1440p, it looks soft. You know? Like it's one of the ugliest games, and you can showcase that by disabling the upscaling here and the anti-aliasing at the same time. Look at how bad this looks. Look at this. Everything is flickering right now. Everything is super shimmery. The aliasing is insane. The bushes look terrible and noisy all of the time. See, this is the native render of the game without any applied anti-aliasing or upscaling. This is the native. This is how the game looks, basically. It is absolutely terrible. Look at this. Look at that blinking mess on screen right now. I bet YouTube compression is gonna wreck everything and you won't be able to see most of the shimmering, but still. And this is why the game requires like TAA, for example, and other games do as well, because now there's no noise, you know, but it's super soft. This is native resolution. This is native 1440p. It's not even 1080p. And with TAA, it looks like this. It's terrible. I hate this. I hate the state of gaming these days. Oh boy. Anyway, the best anti-aliasing possible here is definitely DLSS with DLAA, and even DLSS quality, in my opinion, looks a little bit better than TAA. You do lose a little bit of resolution, and that's noticeable, but at least it's not as soft at the same time. So, yeah. Anyway, This is decent now, decent baseline FPS as you know already, and let's enable that frame generation on top of this. Reflex still enabled, of course. And yeah, there we go. Input lag is minimal. It's pretty much the same experience as 1080p resolution was, basically. So this is decent. And you know what? The 8GB version of this card would be struggling a heck of a lot right now because you can see the allocated VRAM there touching like 9GB sometimes. And that means that if you had that GPU, in terms of raw power, it would be capable of playing this game on high settings with DLSS quality, but in terms of VRAM, it would be limited to 1080p, basically. If you wanted 1440p, it would be even more of a stuttery mess, and I can't even imagine a bigger stuttery mess than this, honestly. This is like one of the worst optimized games that has come out this year, unfortunately. It's very sad because it's a great game, you know, and they could have made it awesome by polishing it a bit more here with UE5, because there are games with UE5 that actually run smoothly, you know, like Clair Obscur. It does have some little issues here and there, but that's more of a linear title, so it doesn't have as much stuttering. And the Finals, for example, but that's a way more simplistic looking game, you know, and it's multiplayer, so it needs to run well. Otherwise, yeah, people just wouldn't play it. And I'm still amazed with how many people can put up with this, honestly. Also, another thing that I just remembered now is that AMD GPUs are considerably smoother in these UE5 titles. They still have a lot of stuttering, of course. I actually tested this on the full review of the 9060 XT about a week ago, and I saw those big spikes here and there. But the smaller spikes that we see, especially without frame generation disabled, aren't really there with the AMD GPUs, at least the RDNA 4 GPUs, you know, 9000 series. But anyways, here during the sunset time, which drops our FPS by a bit more, it drops us down into the 80s, 70s here as well. But even with 70 FPS, which means a baseline FPS of like 50 or 45, still feels alright in terms of responsiveness. It is playable. But these big spikes, these huge stutters, are just so damn annoying. And I guess if you are playing the game for like 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, you're probably going to load in everything that there is to load, and those bigger stutters will probably be gone, you know, and smooth out over time. But if you restart the game, it happens again. As you saw, I actually did restart the game. We've already went to these places, the castle, you know, and it still had those stutters. Hello, Roach? How's it going, buddy? Oh, boy. We finally got him. We finally got him. Hey, dude, how's it going? Are you gonna claim your horse or nah? Of course not. He knows that Roach belongs to El Crispo, my friends. Oh, yes. 140s. Oh, 150s. Jesus. I guess during nighttime it's way less intensive because we don't have like shadows and so on. So yeah, that's about it, guys. DLSS quality plus FG is probably the best way to play this game on high settings with no lumen hardware ray tracing with the 5060 Ti. I'm gonna try DLAA plus FG. Obviously, it feels really good now because the baseline FPS are way higher because it's nighttime. So I'm just gonna load the previous save game again. And okay, it's not too bad. It drops to like 71 frames per second minimum. Input lag is definitely more noticeable than it was before, you know, and that frame time sometimes is a little bit thicker for some reason. Look at that. Yeah, whenever that happens, you can definitely feel a lot of input lag. I guess it's because of the baseline FPS being way too low. Could be better. Could definitely be better, but it's expected once again since the baseline without frame generation was pretty low. But anyway, that's an option as well, right? But let's go up to 4K resolution, guys. Here we have it, 3840 by 2160 using the same high settings. I think at this point we will need to lower it down from high. Let's check it out. Okay, so it is dead. Oh my god, it's struggling. It's struggling a lot. Look at this. Oh boy. And then you compare this to like Forza Horizon 5 or The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. Those games will look better than this. and they play flawlessly at 4K with some DLSS. And I mean, in the case of Forza Horizon 5 at 4K native resolution, it will play it at ultra settings at like 100 FPS, no problems. Anyway, what can we do to make it better here at 4K resolution without touching the preset? Otherwise, it will look really bad once again. I guess performance DLSS, which renders the game at 1080p, is a good idea, and yeah, it does put us into the 60s and 50s. That's not too terrible. All right. Yeah, it's a bit more intensive than 1080p native resolution was with the LAA. It's a bit more intensive than 1440p with quality DLSS. This now drops into the 40s and 50s, as you can see. 40s at its minimums, basically, like 49 frames per second. But it's not too terrible. It is actually a smooth experience. Coming from 24 FPS, I mean, this is amazing. It's buttery smooth right now, which is awesome. Yeah, I don't know. It really depends on how much it will drop to and how often it will drop to the minimum values, or into the 40s, basically. Because that's where the frame generation starts to add a lot of input lag, basically. Here we go. We're outside now. Still getting 60s around here. Not too bad at all. Yeah, I can live with that, actually. It also looks better than even 1440p native resolution. That's the good thing about 4K res, and the awesome thing about having 16 gigabytes in this GPU is that you can actually buy a 4K monitor and play with DLSS performance and get very similar FPS to like 1440p quality DLSS or even 1080p native resolution in a lot of titles, and with way better visuals than 1440p native or 1080p native on those monitors, of course. And that's why the 5060 Ti, even though it didn't perform as expected, or at least as I expected in my full review, you know, and I was really disappointed with it, it's been growing on me because I increased the resolution at DLSS, and it is actually capable of providing good experiences in most games. In this one, it's still a bit hit and miss, but this is one of the worst case scenarios, basically. Let's go ahead and try the frame gen on top of this. Let's apply that. And with the DLSS frame generation over a baseline of 58 frames per second, we're now getting 80s. So a little bit lower than what we saw at the other resolutions, of course, which is to be expected, I think. You know, the upscaling part still is intensive. So 4K performance DLSS will always be a little bit more intensive than 1080p native because of the upscaling part of it. But yeah, this looks great, guys. It's still smooth. It does have quite a bit more input lag that I can notice. But I mean, some people might be fine with that. I think I would, actually. I wouldn't really have a problem playing like this. Those frame times, though, like the big stutters are what kills it for me. Or is what kills it for me, whatever. I just can't. Even if I wanted to play this game the entire way through in my free time, for example, I wouldn't be able to. At least I wouldn't be able to have fun with these performance issues, these stutters. My girlfriend, for example, can't really notice most of the stuttering issues in most titles. In this one, she can, definitely, because these are insane stutters in this one. But in a lot of them, I'm like, don't you see these stutters? How can you be playing like that? And she's like, no, I'm fine. So yeah, it's definitely, some of the talk here about the stuttering is definitely me being picky. But in this title, I feel like a lot of people will be put off by it. I wouldn't really drop it down from high settings. It performed a little bit better on high settings here with performance DLSS and frame generation than I thought it would, honestly. Hello there. Goodbye. Yeah, I thought it was going to get like 40s, given that we got 24 FPS at native 4K resolution, but then performance DLSS actually improved things by a lot. So it's pretty playable now. So, yeah. That's been it. Before I go mad with these insane stutters, I'll end it right there. Alright, because, oh boy, it just makes me super mad, guys. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye.